Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. It's time for another episode of Rock and Read. Well, we did it. Finally, we made it to the last chapter of the great book of rock trivia. Reading this book was a thrilling experience for me. I discovered so much new, interesting information. I'm glad I picked this book. It has been great having you guys along for the ride. Thank you for sticking with me. So let's put this book to bed and read the last chapter. Chapter 7 is called Mad Miscellany. Here we go. Some stories and facts are just too crazy to fit into any category. Find out which singer had a crush on Ringo Starr and which band had an affinity for chainsaws. Learn about strange curses in the music world, who has been electrocuted by the equipment on stage, and which country's revolution may owe a debt to rock music. Breaking up is hard to do. As a fan, the worst news you can hear is that your favorite band is breaking up. Due to the intense pressure stars face when touring or playing long concerts, personality clashes, and changing musical directions, band breakups are a sad fact of rock music. Yoko Ono is a common scapegoat for the breakup of the Beatles, but she wasn't really responsible for it. It's true, however, that she didn't get along with the rest of the band, especially George. Many accounts say that George and John got into a fight because Ono ate some of George McVitie's chocolate digestive biscuits. Hey, they're good cookies. Her presence in the recording studio annoyed the band because Girlfriends and Wives were previously banned from there, but her presence wasn't the only factor. To put it briefly, John and Paul had very different creative approaches that sometimes harmonized and sometimes conflicted. Manager Brian Epstein's death meant the band had to handle the non-musical aspects. Apple lost the money since they weren't accustomed to budgeting. The new manager, Alan Klein, was a nightmare. George's songwriting abilities developed, and he grew frustrated at being sidelined by John and Paul, and John's capriciousness added to the instability. The Beatles broke up in 1969, and all four band members went on to have successful musical careers on their own or with other bands. Family feuds. Survey said! Sometimes band problems and family problems go hand in hand. Perhaps the most famous contemporary example is Oasis, led by brothers Noel and Liam Gallagher, who have never gotten along. Liam traces their rivalry back to a night he came home drunk and urinated on his brother's new stereo, and they fought their way through 7 Beatles-inspired and drug-fueled albums before splitting for good in 2009. According to Noel, Liam smashed one of Noel's guitars. Liam denied this, but Noel claimed he couldn't work with Liam any longer, and that he's like a man with a fork in a world of soup. The Everly brothers' personal conflicts were reinforced by abuse of prescription drugs and alcohol. The pot boiled over during a 1973 concert in Hollywood when Don arrived drunk and botched the lyrics to Kathy's Clown. Phil clobbered him with a guitar, and the duo was broken. The most famous Kinks fight was between Dave Davis and drummer Mick Avery, but brothers Ray and Dave had their own rivalry, which culminated in Ray stomping on Dave's birthday cake. Egos and addictions. The Pixies broke up due to frontman Black Francis's jealousy over fans' love of bassist Kim Deal. Francis sidelined her, and Deal went on to form the Breeders. However, the biggest reason for band infighting and breakup appears to be the perception, or reality, that one or two people are assuming creative control over the band at the expense of other band members. This led to the demise of the Beatles, the Police, Smashing Pumpkins, Guns N' Roses, the Eagles, and Creedence Clearwater Revival. Substance abuse also killed important band members, like John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, or rendered them unable to perform. In some cases, the band keeps going, but never recovers its former glory. Shortest Beatle has a long list of fans. Though he has never been considered as handsome as his bandmates, Ringo Starr's humor, personality, and talent made him a favorite with fans, women, and other musicians. Legendary drummers Ginger Baker, Steve Gadd, Keith Moon, and John Bonham were all admirers of Ringo and raved about the Beatles' uniqueness and talent. Despite this, Ringo did not like to show off, and, unlike many other drummers of his time, refused to do a drum solo lasting more than 15 seconds. And Ringo was the one who inspired a streak of novelty records in 1964. Perhaps the most famous singer to record a song about Ringo was Bonnie Jo Mason with Ringo, I Love You. Never heard of her? Bonnie Jo Mason was the name Phil Spector gave to the teenage Sherilyn Sarkinson because her name didn't sound American or memorable enough. Still doesn't ring a bell? She later shortened her name and performed as Cher. The song didn't get much airplay, partially because her deep voice caused disc jockeys to think she was a man singing about another man. And well, this was the 60s. Other songs about Ringo include Pat Winneter's Ringo, I Want to Know Your Secret, Rolf Harris's Ringo for President, and Ringo by Lauren Green. Weird Al Yankovic. The one and only Weird Al has been mentioned here a few times, but he really deserves his own space. Alfred Matthew Yankovic started playing the accordion when he was 7 years old, and he can also play the keyboards and theremin, yes, the really difficult one. He follows a mostly vegan diet and has never done recreational drugs, though he had fun making his college acquaintances laugh when they were high. Prolific parodist. Weird Al has done over 65 parodies, but he also writes original songs. Most of his albums are half parody and half original. Legally, he doesn't need permission to write a parody of a song, but he asks anyway, in order to maintain good relations with record labels. Most artists like Weird Al are happy to let him do the parody. Some, like Kurt Cobain, believe you really made it when Weird Al parodies one of your songs. He recorded his first parody, My Baloney, from My Sharona in a bathroom on his college campus. Generally, Weird Al does not accept suggestions from other musicians or fans, but there was one possible exception, as some say that Like a Surgeon was Madonna's idea. Michael Jackson was a fan of Weird Al, and the two used to exchange notes when they recorded in neighboring studios. Jackson also allowed Weird Al to use the Bladder music video set to record Fat. Weird Al's highest-ranking hit today is White and Nerdy, and Chameleonaire believed that Weird Al's parody boosted his own song and helped him win a Grammy. No thank you. A few musicians did not want to be parodied, for various reasons. Due to his vegetarian diet and animal rights activism, Paul McCartney did not want Weird Al to turn Live and Let Die into chicken pot pie. McCartney suggested tofu pot pie. Prince and Jimmy Page declined permission, but didn't give reasons. Though Page claims to be a fan, Weezer allowed Weird Al to use a snippet of Buddy Holly in the alternative polka, but then changed their minds and asked the disappointed Al to remove it. Daniel Powter initially withheld permission for Weird Al to parody Bad Day with You Have a Bad Date, but he changed his mind. Unfortunately, it was too late to record the song. Weird Al also writes children's books. His first is called When I Grow Up, in which a young boy entertains his class with all the outlandish jobs he wants to have as an adult. Shocking performances. With all that electrical equipment on stage, something is bound to happen sometimes, and it has. Keith Richards reportedly flew backwards in a blue spark and ended up unconscious after the guitar touched a microphone stand. If you're a guitarist, learn how this works so it doesn't happen to you. But apparently Keith Richards is invincible, and he was fine soon after. George Harrison was also electrocuted by his microphone, but it was just a quick shock. Millennial pop star Kesha was electrocuted in a particularly sensitive body part by an electric chastity belt. Do not try this at home. Kiss guitarist Ace Frehley immortalized his brush with mortality in a song called Shock Me, the first song he ever sang on an album. Still holding his guitar, the rocker grasped a metal rail and was promptly immobilized by the electrical current. He finally managed to let go and fell several feet. He still finished the concert after a 10-minute break. A rock and roll revolution. Rock music helped Czechoslovakia usher in its nonviolent tradition from communism to democracy. Plastic People of the Universe is a Czech rock band that, at its beginning, was influenced by the music of the Velvet Underground and Frank Zappa. Since the band had an English name and sang in English rather than Czech or Slovak, and its members had long hair, all which were seen as forms of protest against the then communist government, the Plastic People had to perform underground and were eventually arrested in 1976. A friend of the band's manager, Ivan Juris, Vaclav Havel, led a movement of dissidents who pioneered Charter 77, a manifesto that criticized the government for human rights abuses that went against the Constitution of Czechoslovakia. This movement of young people, in combination with Soviet-led initiatives through the 1980s of Perestroika and Glasnost, eventually led to the formation of a democratic government in Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel was elected president at the end of 1989. This nonviolent transition was named the Velvet Revolution by the dissident's English translator Rita Kilmova. The fact that the word used to describe the revolution is shared by the band Velvet Underground may or may not be a coincidence. Slovaks use the term gentle revolution, and the word velvet may have been chosen by Czechs because velvet is a soft and gentle fabric. In any case, Lou Reed of the Velvet Underground visited Havel in his home in Prague Castle and has met and performed with the plastic people of the world. Grunge music. Grunge is a genre of alternative rock that began in Seattle in the mid-80s but peaked in popularity in the mid-90s. Alternative rock musicians sought to replace the increasing greed, ostentation, and ego they saw in the rock scene, particularly in glam metal or hair metal. The term grunge is usually credited to Mark Arm, singer of the Seattle-based bands Green River and Mudhoney. He described the sound of his band at the time as pure grunge, pure noise, pure. He later claimed that he heard this term used by Australian rockers to describe similar music. Flannels and boots ruled the decade. Grunge music also influenced 90s fashion. Since many grunge musicians were from Seattle, where it was chilly and rainy, they wore clunky boots and flannel shirts, hence the popularity of combat boots and flannels in that decade. One of the biggest alternative rock bands is Pearl Jam. They originally called themselves Mookie Blaylock, after the New Jersey Nets point guard of the same name, and though they didn't keep that name, they still dubbed their first album 10 after his jersey number. Nirvana was another influential band, but they broke up in 1994 after Kurt Cobain's death. Drummer Dave Grohl went on to form the Foo Fighters, but he almost joined Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Alice in Chains, one of the biggest Seattle grunge bands, was originally a hair band, though Lane Staley was the only member present for the band in both incarnations. They still have a connection to classical rock, though. Ann Wilson of Heart, also from Seattle, sings in 3 songs on the band's 1992 EP, Sap. Well, that's all for this book. I will be replacing this book with It's So Easy and Other Lies by Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses. Stay tuned for that. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.